Webinar is being recorded and summarized. We will share this out to all participants. So if you have to jump, I know that we have registrations over 100 from around the world. So we have registrations from basically every time zone that you can live in, which I think helps to show a couple things. One, the massive community of Moodle and the reach of our partners. Who were so gracious in helping us to spread the word. So I really wanted to make a personal thanks to Catalyst IT EU, where Marcus works, to BrainStation 23, to the team at Cursive, which I lead, and obviously, and of course, Moodle, which for and without, I'm not sure we would have a webinar like this that is community oriented, based on open source software, that you can install and run on your site for free or pennies. And we will cover all of those aspects of the wonderful work that Marcus has done. A couple things about our goals. So we want to talk about the plugin. This is the AI feedback question type for Moodle quizzes. Now, if you are not a Moodle user, that's fine. There is going to be a significant amount of information that is very relevant to you as you consider for your organization, whether, if, and how you're implementing AI feedback and or scoring into your learning management system, or into your workflows, or encouraging students to go and get that feedback on their own. So lots of things to consider. There is very specific and really great research on AI feedback. And we will cover some of that. We will also talk about summative versus formative assessment. We'll spend probably a lot of time on that. We will talk about how this works, so you can kind of visualize and understand the different components of sending a question, the student's answers, and what wrapping or what additional context you must have to send to a large language model in order to get good, relevant, accurate, consistent feedback from that system. We'll talk about optimization. Unfortunately, our guest Robert Dykes is caught in an overnight flight from US to Japan, and is unable to make it. You can thank our air traffic controllers probably, or something like that. Sorry about that. We'll touch briefly on kind of considerations for integrity. That's one of my main interests, and then we'll open the floor for questions. So enough about the agenda. I'm going to turn it over to Marcus. He's going to lead the next 10 to 15 slides and get us rolling. So we'll put the scariest message up first, and talk a little bit about summative versus formative assessment.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Joseph, and thank you for reorganizing the slides. I tend to reorganize things right leading up to the very end, and Joseph has, I've just perused the way he's changed it, and it's exactly as I would like. So these large language models, or AI as they're sometimes called, which I consider to be a marketing term, they are non-deterministic, and that means that they may return a different result for the same input. And for this reason, I make this massive disclaimer that you should use this for teaching and learning, but not summative. And by summative, I mean where the outcome will significantly affect the life of a student. And in fact, this it's considered to be high risk according to the new EU regulations regarding the use of this stuff in education. I'm just wondering, do you have control over the next slide, Joseph?
Yes.
Okay, right. So I'll go give you a thumbs up on next slide, please. So about this plugin, which I first announced on Christmas Day in 2023. I'm not a Christmassy person. Just the sort of big ground rule is that all the PHP code I'm going to show you is available under the GNU public license, with the freedoms and limitations that you'll probably be aware of. It will work with any OpenAI, and OpenAI are the people behind ChatGPT compliant large language model system. And my purpose is the benefit of teachers and learners, and by implication that this is not for surveillance, it's not to help people who are managing teachers. This is about teaching and learning. The other thing is there's a lot of publicity, possibly hype, around the use of large language models and AI. And sometimes I wonder how much some of the announcements I read of is in real world use. AI Text, I've closely collaborated with BYCS in Bavaria, formerly known as recently as MEBIS, and they look after the Moodle accounts for 1.6 million students in Bavaria, not all of which are on systems using this yet, but large numbers are. It's available from the Moodle plugins database, where that's recording 270 installations globally, although that's typically a significant underestimate of the actual installed base. And speaking English language teaching. So what are the requirements? You need something apart just from your Moodle. You need some external large language model or AI system to be configured. So that's an admin task. From a teacher's perspective, it requires a minimum of the question stem, which the student sees. And then minimally, you just need those two things. You need a prompt, and that is the thing that gets sent off to the large language model, and that is not seen by the student. Right. So as I've hinted there, it works with most large language models, and I've tested it with a lot of them, and recently I've been testing it particularly to see the best combination of performance and price. During its development, I made a visit to Japan. I was on the flight back from Japan with a laptop computer, and it was working with that. Clearly, it was a modest computer, so everything was very slow, but you literally can use this thing with no internet, and I've tested it with the Raspberry Pi. As I say here, you can use it with ChatGPT from OpenAI, which is, most people know that as the AI thing, but there are faster, cheaper alternatives, and also in certain jurisdictions, such as the EU, people sometimes would rather it was something that was entirely within their jurisdiction. Next slide, please, to quote Mr. Whitty from anybody in the UK. Give me a slide, Joe. Give me a new. Beautiful. Right. Okay. So once it's been installed and configured by your site admin, it will appear just like any other question type. And I've got that arrow pointing there, it's a little brain icon. So you can add it to a quiz, or you can add it in the question bank. And the way it actually works is that when the student types in their response in a quiz, their response is wrapped around with a prompt that the teacher has created, and sometimes it can also be wrapped with additional stuff that's configurable globally. That is then sent off to the remote large language model or AI system, and the result of that is shown as feedback. And one of the benefits of this pedagogically is the response comes back, I would say immediately, but when I say immediately, typically in a few seconds. And I made a video the other night, and you could see that I was using one system where the response was quite slow. You'd have to wait for several seconds. So I switched to a thing called Grok, and that offers me, a lot more performance. Next slide, please. So this is what it looks like. This is the anatomy of a prompt option. So you've got the question text, just like in any Moodle question type. That's what the student sees. You've got the AI prompt. That's where you provide the context. For example, what are the right answers, including the examples. And this is where the magic happens. And then you have the optional thing, which is the mark scheme. And that provides directions for scoring. And it's interesting, the word rubric there, Joe put in there. And I think of rubric as a thing in Moodle, but of course it's not. And this is how you mark something. So that's a really good term to use there. As I say, mark scheme is optional because these large language models, they can be really quite varied at the way they evaluate, and a mark scheme giving a single a number can be, you have to experiment and try with it. And by the way, there is a version of this that you can get instant access to in a teacher role and have a play with it. Ideally, see if you can break it, see if you can come up with some interesting prompts. Next slide, please. So this is an animation I made that illustrates one of the features that was delightfully easy to implement, but gets language teachers quite excited. And that is that it can be set up so that the response given to a student is in their native language. because as one of the teachers in Japan said, it's very frustrating for a teacher to spend a lot of time giving student feedback. And if you give them student feedback in English, then they're learning English, that's kind of like really awkward. And you see here, this is, I'm just going, this lasts only a few seconds. I've created a question and it's going to give me feedback, and it's and you can see in the bottom there it says comment, the analysis is correct, the sentence should be tomorrow I will go to town, and not tomorrow I am going to town, the use something, something, something. And then what I'm going to do, I'm hoping this is maybe this is another example, but this is another one. Say, yesterday I went to the park. Notice I've misspelled park as PRK here, and bizarrely it says, I think it says everything else in the sentence is, oh, that's interesting. Oh, the sentence has a spelling error. So there's a version of this where it actually guesses that it really should be park rather than PRK, which sometimes it seems like it's brilliant, and sometimes not so brilliant. It's almost like I'm not paying attention. Anyway, so here I'm a student. I'm going to switch from English and I'm going to switch to Japan. So this will all be Japanese characters from here on in, which is really confusing for me because I don't speak Japanese. So now I'm going to go back to the course. I'm going to take this quiz again. Oh, I switched it to French. That's good. At least I can slightly understand it. You should be able to see here, I hope. Yeah, incomplete, yeah. They kept a seat for you, vérifié, excuse my accent there. And you can see here that the feedback was in the user's preferred language. Next slide, Joe. And that's really, really useful for when you're teaching languages. Okay, so again here, this is just the example of you have it in English. It says the correct form should be yesterday I went to the park. And then you can see here, Joe's moved on. I've switched my preferred language to French. You can see that's in the left-hand side where the icons are, and it's given them the feedback in French. And you can see here, it's even translated the warning, and I've spoken to lots of people about the level of the warning, because students can sometimes just assume a response from a large language model is correct, and that's really not a good idea. So you can configure this at a global level, and you could configure it to be as blood-curdling as you might want. So you can see here, this is in Japanese. I'm reliably informed that that makes sense in Japanese, but I'm also been speaking to somebody who is using this in the context of native Arab speakers, Arabic speakers, I should say, and you get this benefit again, the feedback is in their native language rather than puzzling over it. Okay, next. So, how can you optimize your questions? Well, the absolute key to all of this is the quality of the prompt. And to assist with this, I was going to say I created a prompt tester, but actually the glory of open source coding is that Justin Hunt, who are famous for the Moodle suite of language learning tools, which are brilliant, he actually came in and created the code for this. And then I picked up his code and modified it. And this is really, really nice, because what it means is you can set up as many as you like of sample responses, and then you click the button and you get to see how it would have responded to that. But another component of optimizing your questions is to read through your student responses, because students can be startlingly imaginative to come up with answers that may have been marked incorrect, but in fact you would consider correct, and sometimes widely incorrect things that illustrate very common misunderstandings about the topic. Next slide, please. So this is just for anybody who's already following this plugin, and that is, again, the beauty of open source. Somebody contacted me in the German-speaking world and said, previously this used to show up just as the HTML, and I said, surely can we have that rendered? And you can see here, this is the testing interface, and rather than just showing you the HTML here, it's actually rendered it. So it's nice to get feedback from people, and I hope I'll get feedback and ideas today about how it can be improved further. So here's some feedback from my visit to Japan a year and a half ago, and I'm going to read this out because it's rare that people are so excited by a thing. It said, perhaps what has me most excited at the present moment is the idea of having students type a paragraph answer to a prompt that will generate general grammatical feedback in Japanese, correcting the student's grammar. Obviously, there would have to be a proviso explaining this is AI and may not be 100% accurate, and that you should always ask your teacher if you're unsure. But, and I almost never use all caps, I've written to him a lot, he doesn't, this is extremely exciting. Providing grammatical feedback to students is exceptionally time consuming for teachers and is quite frequently incomprehensible to students. And I was a teacher for 10 years in the classroom, and I gave up a lot of my social time, which I should have been having fun, giving feedback to students when I wasn't even sure whether or not they ever looked at it, but at least I knew how they were doing with their work. And next slide, please. So, and I was speaking to you about this only yesterday, about this issue of subjective questions. And the example I gave here is, the question says, describe two of the main causes of the French Revolution. And off the top of my head, I gave this example of poverty and apathy. I was just thinking stuff up. And Joe gave me some other nice ideas of politically contentious things that come up here. And my sort of broad advice is to be hyper cautious about using this kind of tool with those kind of issues. And if you do use it, very closely monitor the interactions with your students, because you really don't want to mislead your students, and you don't want to bring in misleading things from the large language models, which after all are really like a summary of the average of views, and that can include the average view, opinions and views of people who may be, in your view, entirely incorrect, I should say. Next slide, please, Joe.
Okay, I think here we have this is the newest feature that Marcus has been in development, I think only 1 week. Is that correct?
1 week, yeah. I should say this is really early days with this, but I do think it's interesting generally. About
and what so I would say, I'll give some context, because I pushed Marcus on this one, is that the ease of setup for a question, and we'll get to why this is an important piece in a minute, on in terms of the prompting and the information that goes both in the AI prompt and in the feedback, requires some really hard thinking. And so it's like when we think of like setting up an essay question in Moodle or in any other LMS, you really just have one line. But research shows that when we're sending information to a LLM, you need a lot more context in order to receive and solicit the right type of feedback and specificity in the marking. So Marcus has done a really great initial integration and kind of proof of concept of how you can help a teacher to create those things without having them to try to like take a full course on prompt engineering specifically for their question type, guided response to make sure that those pieces of information are automatically created, speeding the time for question creation, and also checking the box in a lot of cases for kind of what we would think is like more minimal information that's going to help the question. It increases the context window in terms of tokens, but for most in cases, I would say is like in testing, we did not see a market increase for cost or anything like that related.
Yeah, I emphasize that this didn't exist last Wednesday, and it's very early prototype. And also the background to it is that at Catalyst, we do hosting for the stack maths question type, which is fiendishly complex and has a huge numbers of fields. And so one of the developments of this is that it should be able to reach inside the current form, pull in data that is used to send off to the remote large language model. So in other words, you could say, what does this question do, this instance, and it would send it off and come back. That's more of an aspiration. What you're seeing here is something, the chat block thing here is something more like a hard-coded prompt, but I do have a video of it, version of my thing working with that. So this is a vision of the future, the near future. And interestingly, this kind of stuff doesn't require, like, it's not like massively hard programming. It's more a case of spending the time on it with somebody who knows what they're doing with Moodle programming. And what it's going through here is illustrating this prompt testing thing here, which I say was originally developed by Justin Hunter Poodle fame. And you can see there that it's actually rendering the response, whereas previously anybody who's used this, it would just share HTML. So I was really pleased to get that feedback from Joe. So you can see a roadmap link there. If that's your thing, you can go and find that quite easily. I'm really open to suggestions. That's Catalyst, who I work for, who can make things happen very quickly in this area. and it's, as I say, it's under development, and the only thing that sort of is not, it could be accelerated given, the thing about, there's time, there's money. If you pay Catalyst EU money, it will accelerate over time the development of it. Thanks, Joe. You got another slide?
Okay, so
Yeah.
you heard first a quote from Robert Herschel, who is at Sojo University in Japan, and they've actually done a research project and published a paper based on their use of this feedback plugin last year, I think. So it's a brand new research and trying to suss out a couple, I think, very important research questions. So first is, did the students find the feedback provided meaningful? Did they notice it? Was it available? And then second is, does the classroom teacher find the feedback provided by the AI text item meaningful, particularly in regard to accuracy and clarity? So they tested a couple different things. One was the display to students and gauging their response to it. It was small n, I think 30-ish students or so, but where they were able to interview and to get really meaningful data from the students who participated. It was over a significant number of questions. So the feedback was consistent. It was not a one-shot only, you took one quiz and they derived the data from that. It was many, many, many opportunities for feedback through open-ended language-based questions. So what I found really interesting here is that the kind of conclusion of their research was that the students did appreciate the feedback that was coming in from ChatGPT. So they mentioned it. They had a generally positive effect on that on the students. They voiced those in the response. The classroom teachers in their evaluation of reading through all of the automated feedback also found that it was quality, it was meaningful, and they commented on the accuracy and clarity. And I think it's a great paper. It's not very long to read, but I think is great, thoughtful application of this as we kind of test and measure whether a large language model set up in this way through an open source software like Moodle, what type of interface, what type of feedback and what type of quality can we expect from that. Now, there was like a pretty important caveat here, is that this is being very new. They were testing at the same time kind of this contextual information, this additional prompt wrapper that goes with the questions and with the student answers to try to optimize those things. And they did find a couple different pieces. So one is that in their interviews with the students, students just 100% kind of took the feedback as authoritative. So the thing is, it basically replaced the authoritative nature of actual feedback from a teacher, where the student would say, oh, okay, now I know where I'm wrong. One of the potential problems that they found is that the feedback that came back sometimes did include minor errors or missed an issue or called out a question that was actually configured correctly. That was not all the time, but in a sense, is like hallucinations did exist. That was kind of documented in the process. But the fact that the hallucinations existed and the level by which the students are at in the school would mean that the students did not know whether or if to be critical of the feedback that was automated. So they had basically said is like the students took it without criticism because they believed that the system was authoritative. So there's risks here in how the positioning in the messaging to students in the kind of more formative or like critical nature that we give to the feedback that AI is coming. Opportunities, I think, for AI literacy kind of abound here in terms of helping students to understand that if you just paste something into ChatGPT and you just take exactly what it says as gospel, there's a risk there that there could be some nuance loss, some incorrectness, some hallucination that is included. And if you don't have the requisite level of knowledge, you won't be able to be critical of that type of information, which I think is consistent with many other thinkers in terms of AI feedback. There's significant value, can't be underscored here, for providing automated, instant, near real-time kind of automatic feedback as an interim from a formative perspective. And I think that there was a call for, how do you either improve this, lower the error rate, or also improve the messaging kind of wrapped around this so that students understand to question, to think about, to kind of to use this with information as their with a grain of salt in a sense. Marcus, any other thoughts on that research particularly?
No, that's although I'm the creator of this and I put a lot of time into this over the last 2.5 years or so, I strongly advise people to be very cautious and be aware that it will not just, in some senses, the problem isn't that it gives you incorrect answers. The problem is it gives you so many correct answers, it's easy to assume that all its responses are correct, and they're not, and they can be misleading. So I am delighted to see an academic paper that both emphasizes how it can be beneficial, but also cautions about the places where there are issues with it.
Very cool. A second research study that I found in the course of setting this up with Marcus, we have been kind of looking at, I've been taking a deeper dive into kind of the contextual information for how to send this information to solicit the best score directly from ChatGPT. And so there is some great research out. This is a very recent journal article evaluating large language model based automated essay scoring. So this is very specifically taking a scoring perspective here, but feedback is generally included as well when you think of kind of the scoring overall. And they looked at accuracy, fairness, and validity from Huang and Wilson. So one of what I wanted to show here is kind of how this fits with the potential or the kind of anatomy of the prompt information that Marcus has set up through his question type. So if you think of we have an AI prompt, so you can say, I want you to evaluate the student based on a specific, what the student answer is for grammatical corrections or something like that. And then you have a rubric and mark down for each error, deduct 1 point, there's a maximum of a couple points. What this research found is that you can improve that by giving a role to the large language model. You can also improve it by sending some sample texts that have already been scored. So you can kind of like wrap some scaffolding information as part of the information. So it's a lot more information to insert if you were just to kind of do this and thumb out or just write very quickly kind of the prompt and the feedback schema. But in a sense, you can start to expand the amount of information that you're sending with the hope and with the goal of improving the output coming back. So there's some really kind of great research that's out there. This is very timely. I know it's 3 years beyond ChatGPT, and kind of I think the really good, rich research is starting to come out related to feedback, especially with the more modern, like 4.0, any of the connections that you're making, any of the open source models that are being used. I believe that this one was focused on ChatGPT or Ollama, and they might have checked a couple of different ones, but great paper to read in terms of like helping a teacher to contextualize what additional information they might want to include in their prompting. And then I think is the main pieces is making sure that they understand that you should test. So one of the great things about Marcus's plugin is the ability to test a response against the information that you've included. And so it's like from my testing, what I would recommend is that test it many times, because it's like, in a sense, is like what you'll find is that LLMs are always unique in the outputs that they have, even if you ask them the same question over and over and over again. And the closer you can get to consistency in terms of like accuracy of, especially from a marking standpoint, as that's coming back from the LLM, is like that's where you want to really kind of put all of your effort. And that could mean that you have to change the stem, right? They're changing the question for more specificity is important here too. So it gets a little bit more into some like thinking like a psychometrician. How do you create objective questions that actually can be answered? Grammatical and language-based questions. I think that the value, as Marcus has shown in the presentations, especially the The localization of languages is like a hugely powerful aspect of this. But as you think of like, can I put in a 200 or 300 word essay prompt and then expect consistent feedback and consistent rubric marking? That it will take a significant amount of time and effort to set up correctly, and a significant amount of training. So don't think it is like it won't be as easy as write my question, write my prompt, set it loose on students. I would say is like put a lot more thinking into the testing of the prompts and to make sure that you're getting consistent output from that feedback. And some of these research about context, what role is the teacher, what grade level should they be marking for? Those are all relevant aspects of the information that the LLM may not have access to, despite the fact that that may exist kind of as part of your course setup or like the tagging that you have in course settings and other things like that from the perspective of a Moodle implementation or a learning management system implementation, for making sure the LLM knows, right? Because otherwise they're just going to receive a text and some rubric information. They're not going to know how to, or they won't have that contextual information that will help them to help it to answer more clearly and accurately. So other thoughts on that, Marcus?
Oh no, that's yeah. I should explain to people that I spend so much time building this thing that I've spent very little time learning to do good prompt engineering, which is probably a good use of my time because that is best done by practicing teachers. And so I did a presentation in Edinburgh, and I included something from somebody in Germany who uses to teach biochemistry, and it was like 2 paragraphs in German of prompting. The thing about everything that I'm talking to you about, we've spoken about today, is this is one thing for us to show you some slides of it, but is no substitute for playing with it. And I put a link in the chat here to a place where you can get instant teacher level access to a course with a bunch of questions. Please don't break them because you could if you wanted. And you can get instant access, by which I mean you don't have to include any personal identity. You can call yourself Jack Sparrow, no password, you get in, you're a teacher, and carry on. But if you do get in as you do give your own name, then we can talk about what you've done in there afterwards. So if people would like to have a click on that link in the chat there, and I can actually read out what it's www.flossed.uk/blog, and you should see a big long link, and you click on that and you'll see a brain, you pick a picture of me, and you'll be on a course. You'll see some confetti because confetti is always good, and then you can go in there and you can take the quiz, and then ideally leave the questions in the quiz alone and go away and create your own and have an experiment with it, and you can burn some of my AI tokens to find out about that. So yeah, really good, Joseph. Yeah, that is it. It's useful, but like with all new tools, I don't want to get into this thing where the thing we've got is a hammer and everything looks like a nail. You know, AI is good. This is not designed to replace teachers. This is designed to save teachers time. And one of the big things that's going on, people say, well, won't the students cheat? And I keep saying, well, if you get to know your students, and I was a teacher for 10 years, then you can talk to them. And if they see something startlingly polished and they suddenly become brilliant, well, you know, maybe that you're not seeing them do the questions. And of course, the counter argument is that, well, teachers don't have the time to do that. I am hoping that if the learning uses this and the teachers have to spend less time doing the marking, I'm hoping, of course, there's a level of organization and politics in this, they will have more time to actually get to know their students, which that's why people go into teaching. People do not go into teaching because they dream of spending their evenings marking. Well, no teacher that I've ever met anyway.
Right. And would you say this personal question is like that we do have a massive caveat and kind of warning related to using the direct output for summative assessment, but yes, that is not to say that the question still could be summative as long as a human in the loop is
Well,
giving exactly. Like the questions can be valid still.
No, well, you're absolutely right, and I've been thinking about that, and I tend to be a bit blood curdling in my warnings because inevitably people get complacent because these things are so frequently correct. But as well as generative AI, I like to think of the idea of I'm going to say suggestive AI. That's not quite the right word, but something that comes up with advice. So if you have a preliminary grading from an AI, and then you have a teacher marking it, that's a perfectly valid use for it, because you can imagine the teacher one way or another looking at your student's response and pasting it into another window anyway. But the important thing is always do not leave it only to the AI, because it is non-deterministic. So yeah, very valid point there. But I think I'm fighting against human nature, because human nature is that if these things are right 98% of the time, it's going to be very tempting to go tick 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 tick, and then sooner or later something will creep through, and there'll be a big song and dance.
Yeah, what I've seen recently is a number of automated assessment and scoring systems out there, and I would say is like one of the things I like about this versus those is the ability to test with a variety of kind of like potential student answers, so you can see the inconsistency or the potential for inconsistency in the feedback that's coming back from the LLM before you subject students to receiving that feedback. The students only are going to submit one question one time, generally, right? You can allow for there's great settings in the quiz that would allow a student to try again to try to maximize and optimize their score. But for many others, it's just like you click and you send all of the 25 papers or 25 responses at once to a LLM. They all come back with one single grade. And what we've just done is we basically have kind of subjected that to a sampling of what are the potential scoring ranges for all of those questions, rather than more meaningful kind of like, do they deserve that grade, in a sense. It's like student attempts only get one shot at this, generally, of like, we're going to create the feedback and the scoring one time. Whereas the potential for submitting many examples is, in a sense, is like unlimited opportunity to try to tune this for accuracy. And I would say it's like that's the big difference. From a student perspective, I would hope that I have a teacher validating this, that the initial feedback is as accurate and as meaningful as possible, because I'm likely to either feel good or feel bad about myself pretty quickly when I receive this feedback based on questions and based on my answers. And so having that, it's important for the teacher and the human to kind of to approve those and to validate those or to discount those and to explain why as part of the feedback.
It's
I
funny.
apologize. Yeah. Okay.
You've just given me an idea, Joseph. This is how it's just occurred to me. Wouldn't it be nice as a teacher if you could reach in and auto-generate or temporary generate, pull in some responses, so you could see in one place how the system responded for the most common student responses? There's a lot of ideas that buzz around for this, and so yeah, you just inspired me there.
Yeah. We did have a guest, Robert Dykes, did this at Sojo University. Another Robert is currently using this, and we were hoping to have his feedback on kind of the current use. It is, I think, similar usage in terms of language learning for students. So they have continued to kind of press and push the envelope for deploying this in a, I hope, and I trust, responsible way based on the research that Robert Herschel has done with his colleagues and kind of the continued exploration of automated feedback through Moodle. To Marcus's last point of whether the student, how do you trust whether the student has done the work? And if you did want to provide AI feedback as an initial response, but in an examination that counts for a grade, there are ways to help to validate, especially open-ended responses or just a student's presence at taking the quiz. So I'll do two here. There's Cursive, which I run. We have process tracking for qualitative assessment. So think of like the process of writing captured through Moodle, where you can play it back. You can look at the how much time a student spent on the questions. You can look at it on a cohort basis for each of the questions that a student on a quiz, to look at kind of like the trends for your class. Really focused on making writing a accessible and valid exercise and continuing there. The playback is basically a playback similar to process feedback or Turnitin Clarity, but we're also verifying those. If students have pasted text, we also are able to identify pasted text into this. So if you are fearful that you might be providing formative automated feedback by AI for AI generated text, this would be one way to help to create some additional context and trust in the student writing. Additionally, and kind of alternatively, or maybe these are used in concert, our good colleagues at BrainStation 23 also have a free proctoring tool for Moodle, which you can use as a quiz access. So basically, you can proctor through a webcam. There's automated processes that happen. You would have to review this, but it's great information to use to try to validate this. So we're not saying that you can't use quizzes for summative assessment. What we're saying is that we would caution you to use the automated feedback and scoring for summative assessments, right? Is that keep the teacher in the driver's seat for the grading and the ultimately the more official feedback that's going to students, but you can provide that context very quickly using the AI feedback tool. Okay, we have a couple questions, so I will, Marcus, anything else?
No, I was just wondering if there's any visible video of you doing a presentation of the Cursive product there, because it's always good to. This is a compressed amount of time that people can take away. Was there any video?
I'll be happy to. I'll include a link. When we send out the link to the recording for this, and to make sure that people have access to this. So yeah, I'd love to have it. Cursive has a free version of it as well, where you can just have the replay available and some other neat things that enhance the writing experience from a student perspective, better autosave, better full page view, some other cool things that are coming out. We are Moodle certified integration partners. So what we would say is like this very Moodle centric. Catalyst is a platinum Moodle hosting provider and service provider based in the EU and Australia and New Zealand, and now Canada, I think, authorized.
Yes,
we also have we are certified integration partners, both Cursive and BrainStation 23 for our respective plugins. So we would not be here but for the Moodle community, and wanted to really give a plug that there's all of these things that you've seen today or that we've talked about are contributing back to the Moodle community pretty specifically. Marcus also like contributor, former teacher, great all-around musician, great all-around person. Okay, couple questions. So the first question is the plugin free? And if how much would it cost if you are not hosting your own LLM?
Okay. As I said at the beginning of this, and this is extremely important to me, and it's one of the reasons I work for Catalyst, is the plugin, everything that you put in your Moodle is free and available under the GPL. You can take it either from the Moodle or plugins database, or you can see the very latest cutting edge code on GitHub if you like to live mildly dangerously. You can select any publicly available, well, let's assume you're not going to host your own large language model, which is an option, and that will come with whatever costs. I started off using OpenAI, which is ChatGPT people, and I was concerned about the cost because initially it was my own post-tax money. But after 12 months of experimentation, I had still spent a lot less than $100 US. Since then, the price of inference has dropped significantly, and I've explored other providers of inference, such as Grok, for instance, who are more competitive. So to answer the question in two parts, yes, it's entirely free, and the cost will vary depending on your own research. But in my experience, and from other people who've used it, they talk about the cost per student being measured in, rather than in dollars or pounds, it's measured in pennies per session per week. So it's the cost of the inference is not generally a concern. I would say that the hidden cost, like everything has a hidden cost, is maintenance, by which I mean if you look in all software has bugs, and you can see in GitHub, you can see things that have come up. There are circumstances where it will fall over because something or other, and therefore it's really useful if you have somebody who knows what they're talking about. This is me telling you that we at Catalyst specialize in maintenance, but you don't need to use us. But if it's important to you, I would advise you to use an organization like Catalyst. And obviously for this, this is the people who know about it.
Yep. I'll give one anecdote is that in testing this and preparing for the webinar, specifically the greater context solution that is required, that sends a lot more tokens. So I was curious if is there a meaningful difference of, single line versus paragraphs and paragraphs. In testing probably 100 attempts. So for the quiz, a couple hundred attempts or 100 attempts. So assume that one class had one quiz, 50 students, 2 questions that used the AI question type. My total cost for that day, 100 attempts, was 1 penny. So this can be like the costs are very, very low. At scale, they will be higher. But I always say is like there may be low cost options using OpenAI or any other, as Marcus mentioned earlier, any compatible API system should be possible to lower costs here.
Okay. I think it's a really valid point, because although I'm saying it doesn't cost very much, it's just me experimenting, and also I haven't used very long prompts. So, and when you just said that, I thought you were going to say, like $2 or something, but that does illustrate the costs of inference are startlingly low.
Got you. Okay. Second question, is the prompt only added in the quiz settings, or is it added specifically to each individual question?
Well, it's 2 things. There is like a system prompt. It's not really a system prompt, and that includes a thing like format this with JSON, right? So there's and that's defined by the admin, and it comes as a default. So what would happen is, originally anyway, is you would have the teacher prompt, you'd have the student response, then it would be sent off for the system level response, and that would be sent off. However, I realized that there were some issues with that, notably that I had effectively hard-coded translate into language. So there's now, I think it's implemented, and please people tell me if they think it's interesting or what have you, is there is a different feature called expert mode, where the teacher has almost complete control over what is sent to the large language model. And you have to know about that, because most teachers don't know what you need to do. So I'm not sure I've answered your question, because the answer
I think that the answer is from the teacher perspective, every question has its own prompt, own marking schema, and question. So it's all very custom, which is on the one hand, totally customizable question to question. Even if you're serving a random question bank, each one is going to have its own prompt, its own version of the context that's also sent with the student as with the student's answer when they submit. So there is some system level configuration that the administrator for your Moodle site can also do.
Yeah, and in an ideal world, I would like it if there was some kind of prompt bank or prompt sharing, whereby teachers could look up some. And I've been collaborating with the people in Germany, but time, all that kind of stuff. It'd be nice if there were a little more help, which is why that little the chat block that you saw in the little video, that is my latest thinking of how can you get an AI to advise you on writing your prompt. But it's very, very early days for that. But if anybody would like to see that accelerated, speak to us at Catalyst.
Gotcha. Here's another question. There's some issues. One, the lack of training from the AI instructor. 2, the need to reveal or share assessment prompting with teachers, right? So the training, I think, of those teachers to use the system. And 3, the fact that future development could actually use saved information from the ChatGPT side. So how are you thinking of further development in your roadmap to kind of address how the field is changing for these frontier models?
Yeah. Okay. With reference to data being sent to, data sovereignty and privacy issues, if I think that comes into there. One of the reasons I so thoroughly enjoy working with the people from Bavaria is that German law is EU law, only stricter. So they had to, in order to use this, they have to pass it through a layer of lawyers that frustrates them, but I kind of like, because it means that if they can do it, anybody can. So number one thing is that if you want to make sure that your students' data absolutely does not get saved by an outside organization, get yourself some hardware, run it. So downstairs, I've got a machine downstairs, and if I turn off my access to the internet, I can still use it. Failing that, here at Catalyst, we have our own, it's AWS-based stack that we have our own software engineers making sure that none of that escapes further, if you're okay with AWS. We're also working on EU domiciled stuff, which doesn't use AWS or anything outside of Europe. So there's lots of layers to this. But in terms of, so there's kind of two questions. One is, where does your stuff go? And the other is training your teachers to get good at prompting. And the business of getting teachers good at prompting, that's outside my scope, in the sense that I think that is going to happen as this technology becomes more and more widely adopted. But I'm not focusing on it because I feel that is something other people can be very good at. Whereas the thing I can be good at is improving this with feedback from people who are doing that kind of stuff. Does that answer the question?
I believe so. Okay, last question is, what about text to speech? Kind of like the process of this. What about oral language learning? Transcribing that, kind of sending it, using it the same way rather than typing it out. I'm going to talk it out.
That's a beautiful, beautiful question. Who asked that? I can't see the question.
Some guy named Poodle Guy.
Ah, him. So what he's not saying there is that he provided me with a branch which has not been integrated that allows the input of speech, right? Okay, so that's not integrated, but I looked at that and I find that very exciting. Because after all, the thing about languages is that learning a language is mostly not about typing it. It's not about typing it, reading it. The thing you want to do is be able to speak it. So that's really important, that is. So there's code for that. I just haven't integrated it and I've been busy. But the other thing is getting the speech from, getting the text turning into speech so people can hear it. And the large language models and the cost of large language models is now reaching the stage where that is very, very doable. But this is where roadmaps become very important, because if you look at my roadmap, and somewhere along the line I've shown a roadmap, those two things are not mentioned because it tends to reflect my own obsessions, which are a bit close focus. But I think those are really, really important questions. And after this call, I'm going to go back on there and update my roadmap to have both text to speech, something to be addressed, and then the input of a speech as an input, as a response. So yeah, he's a good guy, Poodle Guy.
He's a good guy. And speaking of Justin Hunt, who is that person that will be actually our next webinar in this series. So we've been focusing on AI in assessment specifically, or generative AI, suggestive AI to use, or suggestive intelligence, as Marcus has coined today. That will be in January. Really excited. Justin Hunt is the developer of Poodle, which is a series of plugins for Moodle focused on language learning. So we will continue along that theme, talking more about the various things that are coming, and also have a discussion also about like the resurgence of Viva Voce, or oral presentation, oral defense, in helping to ascertain whether students are learning what they have learned. So I really appreciate, Marcus, thank you so much for the amazing information, for joining me today, for sharing your time, the many other places that we were able to meet to coordinate this, all of the contributions that you've made to the Moodle community through this plugin and others. Yeah, thank you all. We're 2 minutes early, so you can have those back, pay it forward, get some fresh air. Marcus, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. Okay, bye-bye for now.
Cheers.